We'll call our May 5th meeting of the Cookeville City Council to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilman Womack.
Here.
Councilman Miller.
Here.
Mayor Shelton.
Here.
Vice Mayor Wheaton.
Here.
Councilman Walker.
Here.
5 present.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those that wish to do so to stand for the invocation given tonight by Leisure Services Director Rick Woods, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag.
Let's pray. Almighty God, we give thanks for this day, this great city, and the quality of life we enjoy here. We're grateful for those who are called to be leaders and for all who contribute and participate in the processes that make Cookeville a great place to live. Bless now this meeting, this council, and the deliberations, that they may be beneficial to our community and pleasing in your sight. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3, consider approval of agenda as presented. Are there any changes?
There is one change from our discussion on Monday. We've added item 6, 7J, which is the evaluation of on-street parking in front of the post office. Item 7J.
Thank you. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any comments from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Under 4A, consider reappointment of representative of the Putnam County Tax Equalization Board. Mr. Mills.
Thank you, council members. Term of service for Mark McKinley as the city's representative on the County Board of Equalization has expired. Of course, the Board of Equalization hears appeals about your local property assessments. The county property assessor, Steve Pierce, has contacted Mr. McKinley. He's agreed to continue to serve if reappointed. We would recommend for his reappointment.
Thank you. Move approval for Mr. McKinley. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any comments or questions from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. 4B, consider appointment to the Tennessee Central Rail Trail Authority. Mr. Mills.
Mayor and council members, Chris Wakefield, who serves as one of the city's representatives on the Central Rail Trail Authority, has resigned from the board. Members serve 3-year terms. Councilman Wallach has indicated he would like to serve on the authority once his term of service as a councilman expires. And I would recommend for the appointment of Dr. Chuck Womack with the effective date beginning at the end of his term as a member of the city council.
Move approval of Dr. Womack for that. Is there a second? Motion is second. Any comments or questions from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 4 yes, motion carries.
4C, consider resolution R220513, honoring Public Works Director Greg Brown upon the occasion of his retirement. Mr. Mills.
Mayor, council members, Greg Brown announced his retirement effective tomorrow. Greg's been with us since 1998. With nearly all of his 24 years of service as our Director of Public Works. He has done a fantastic job. He'll be missed. Mayor, as you say, we have a resolution prepared, and I'll ask you to read it.
Yes, sir. So whereas embarking on a career in public service, Greg Brown began his employ with the city of Cookeville as a civil engineer in 1998. Greg took the helm as director of the Public Works Department in 2000. And whereas during his tenure as department director, Greg has shown dedication and commitment to the citizens of Cookeville and Putnam County, seeing many projects come to fruition, including the renovation and relocation of the Public Works Department to the facility on Spring Street, numerous major street and sidewalk improvements such as Old Kentucky Road, West 9th Street, Fairgrounds and West Jackson Streets, Veterans Drive, Highlands Boulevard, and Tennessee Avenue, as well as downtown enhancements. And whereas his leadership within the department has been evident with its accomplishment of its team over the years, including the implementation of side-load automated residential trash pickup, the establishment of city recycling centers, development of the West Jackson Street brush site, furthering the city's stormwater program, and his oversight of the massive cleanup from the March 2020 tornado event. And whereas his extensive career has evolved with the growth of the city, he leaves a legacy of building a solid foundation of partnerships and working relationships with numerous agencies and organizations as he recognizes the importance of working as a community to provide services and positive growth for the citizens. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of Cookeville, Tennessee, that on behalf of the employees, the citizens and city council, sincere appreciation is hereby extended to Greg Brown for his valued service to the city, and best wishes are bestowed upon his retirement. So you are required to talk, which I know you love, so go right ahead, sir.
Well, I'd like to thank you for all the support Public Works received over the years from this council and previous councils. Also from City Manager James Mills, previous city managers Mike Davidson and Jim Shipley. Also like to thank the Public Works employees for the work they do, from getting out in the middle of the night to salt the roads and clean up the streets after a storm, to picking up garbage every day, to building the projects that we do and making them happen. I'd like to thank my wife, Phyllis, and the family for the support they've given me through the years. I just want you to know that the City of Cookeville is a great place to work. I've enjoyed my time here, and the thing that I'll miss most in retirement is the people that work here. Thank you.
That's awesome. From the council? Anybody have anything?
Yeah, sure, Greg. We appreciate your professionalism, everything that you've brought to the city. There's so many things that couldn't have been done without your knowledge and expertise and desire to make our city better. And I greatly appreciate all your service.
Thank you.
I don't think anyone knows, except you probably, how much goes into public works. I know that I did when I first came on city council, and then I sat down and talked to you and heard all the things you do and thought, how does one person, manage all that? And you've done a great job, and we're going to be sad to see you go, but we know you've got some good people over there to keep it on.
Thank you.
Yeah, from a councilman standpoint, we get phone calls about trash pickup and leaf pickup all the time. And every time a citizen's called about an issue like that, I've been able to contact you, and you've been able to take care of it very rapidly. And I hope we can continue that type of customer service in the future. So thank you.
I've been impressed by the sidewalk program that you've fathered. It's been great, and seeing all the sidewalks develop in the last several years in Cookeville has been one of the nicest thing about the way Cookeville has developed. And it's just a pleasure to see how well you've worked.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just echo those comments. It's been a pleasure for 16 years that I've had a part of been on the council, and to see what's been accomplished and how you lead those folks, and you don't just lead them, you get out there and work with them. And I think that says a lot. It gets people to work with you, as it's very evident by how much you've accomplished in your career. So thank you very, very much for all you've done.
Thank you all.
All right. Under old business, 5. Oh, yeah, we better vote on that, I guess. Yeah. So is there a motion to receive the resolution? Motion and a second. Any further comments? All vote.
All votes correct. Yes, motion carries.
Under old business, 5A, consider approval of minutes of council meeting held on April 21. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
5B, consider on second and final reading ordinance O-220304, amendments to the official street map. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. There are no changes to the ordinance for the amendments to the major street map. We've had no calls or comments, and I recommend approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. 5C, consider on second and final reading ordinance O-220302, rezoning of a portion of parcel located on East Spring Street, tax map 53L, Group C, parcel 17.01 from RM14 multifamily residential to CO local commercial. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mayor and council. Again, we've had no changes to the ordinance and no calls or comments, and I recommend approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
5D, consider on first reading ordinance O-220303, rezoning of 5411 Lovelady Road, tax map 96, parcel 69 from RS20 single family residential to RS5 single family residential. Consideration of the item postponed at the April 21 city council meeting. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As you said, this item was postponed from consideration at the April 21st council meeting. During council discussion at last month's meeting, council had indicated they would like the developer to consider PRD for the subject property. The petitioner has indicated in a correspondence to city staff and to council that PRD was not feasible for the project. The Planning Commission's recommendation was to rezone the parcel as a whole. Got the maps up here. The Planning Commission's recommendation was to rezone the parcel as a whole, consisting of approximately 107 acres from RS20 to RS5. At the council's direction, the planning department has prepared options for the proposed rezoning to provide a lower density transition zone near the existing residences. These options we did discuss at the April 21st meeting. This first option would maintain an area adjacent to the existing homes as RS20 single family residential. This would include rezoning approximately 96 acres to RS5 single family residential. An additional option that was provided would include would provide a transition of RS10 zoning, which would provide a step down in density from the existing residences to the proposed RS5 zoning area. This option provides approximately 19.83 acres as RS10 and would rezone approximately 87 acres as RS5, single family residential. That option would provide the largest transition zone. In the correspondence that I referenced, the developer had indicated that they had entered a purchase sale agreement for an adjacent property, and the planning department prepared an additional option that would provide a transition zone from the existing residences located on South Lovelady Road and would rezone approximately 103 acres to RS5 single family residential. So those are the options the planning department prepared in consideration of this item. I'm happy to answer any questions the council has.
Okay. So as presented, it was RS5, correct?
Yes, as recommended by
The planning commission.
Commission.
All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All right. We'll open this up for comments and discussion from the council.
I'll start out. I want to thank the developer for putting all this work into this. This is going to be a really nice development for our community. We really need these houses. Right now, as a young family, it's very difficult to find houses in this price range and with this footprint. And I'm really excited about this development. So thank you.
I've got a few things I'd like to say about it. I'm thankful for Cookeville and the opportunity to live in such a great place. I'm proud to be a member of this council that has been able to usher in a community that is blessed with growth and economic vitality, while also preserving the community that we love. And I think that's important. While serving as the council representative on planning, our city has approved 728 single-family lots since, and an additional 28 multifamily units in the city limits since just last year. Those are big housing numbers. And Cookeville is fortunate to have these single-family units coming available, as it is a necessity for a community to prosper. And that's also really important. This development is different than those 728 single-family units that have been placed in our pipeline and in the past 2 years due to its scale and density, and therefore requires thoughtful care and consideration in addressing impacts to local residents and their concerns. You know, it's my opinion that we should consider these larger developments as planned residential developments as allotted in our zoning code, so we can hear public input and then address public concerns. Allowing this project to continue as RS5 does not provide the city with the legal ability to ensure these developments are built as promised or require the necessary changes to lessen the impacts on the surrounding community. The proposal of this amendment to have a transitional zone as part of this request kind of acknowledges the need for that. I would recommend for any development of this scale and density to be submitted as a planned residential development. And I encourage our community to continue to envision growth as a necessity and challenge my fellow leaders of our community to usher in this continued growth with careful thought and consideration for the residents.
I just want to say, I appreciate everyone who reached out to me, whether it was a phone call or a letter or an email. Your concerns did not fall on deaf ears. We heard you. I'm the vice mayor for the city of Cookeville. It's my responsibility to make decisions that are best for the city of Cookeville. Those are not easy decisions, and I know none of us up here take those lightly. I know that all of us have spent countless hours reading statistics, researching reports, driving by this development, driving by other developments, talking to our planning commission, and talking to our city departments. And what we found is that Cookeville needs homes, and we need affordable homes. So I thank everyone for reaching out to me, and we heard you.
I have a little bit of a past history with this piece of land. O.J. Wright was a patient of mine many years ago. And the city council in 2002 to 2006 looked at the O.J. Wright farm as a potential development for the fairgrounds, the White County Fairgrounds, the Putnam County Fairgrounds, and a soccer complex. So I went all over that farm at that time, went down to the floodplain and went down to the river and walked all over that. And it was a nice piece of property. But we, the city council at that time, if we hadn't had the option of building the soccer complex by the high school, would have probably developed that piece of property at that time as a soccer complex, and possibly with the aid of the county into a White County, Putnam County fairground. So I have a history of looking at the property and seeing how nice it was and is, and looking at it at that time. I think it's centrally located. I've thought for years it would be developed to some extent, but it stayed like it is. But I think it's too nice a piece of property to not be developed. And it's in a central location. It's in a nice place where you can get on Lovelady Road across 111 and get into town. And I think at some point there may be interchange at Lovelady Road going on to 111. I think that's possibly down the road. So it's just... And 2 weeks ago, I talked about a PRD, and but the developer, for whatever reason, and I can see reasons, we don't have a real good track history for developing PRDs from my knowledge. We proposed that, and planning has worked. but not that many have developed. And I don't know what the reason is, but there is a reason that we haven't developed PRD. I think some localities have architectural, what do you call it?
Architectural design standards. Yes.
Standards for development, for RS5, RS10, that's type of zoning. But we don't. And I think that's something that the planning commission ought to consider. Well, we don't have that as an option. So we've got a problem.
I'd like to speak to that for just a second, the architectural standards. I mean, there is certainly a debate on whether architectural standards or planned residential development standards are the better way to go. With planned residential development standards, you've got an option to work with the development and set those standards as you work with the challenges that are on that development. With architectural standards, they apply across the board. I certainly don't think that the council would want, and I would not want the city to adopt architectural standards through the single family residential zones. And that's a strong reason that I think it's important to look at these as planned residential developments, because you get into a very you go down an interesting path is the best way to explain that, when you start telling people how to design their homes and how to design their products. But with a product this large, when you're talking about 300 plus homes and 100 acres or more being developed, I think, the reality is that, we do need to have some discussion there and ensure that the product that's going to, we're entering into a contract and a partnership with the developer in this case. We've got to provide sewer to that area. We've got to overcome these obstacles and we're changing the zoning and zoning it down to our highest density single family residential. So I think it's really important that you take the time to get it right and take the time that the contract between the city and the developer. And I know there's challenges to that, and I would encourage the planning commission to work to overcome those and not to put too many restrictions on developers. But it gives them an opportunity to also address the concerns of the citizens, and that's what
we do have architectural design standards in our code, right? But that we specifically exempt single family and duplex residential, and that's just because it is an added cost on residential development, and that's was intentionally exempted when those standards were adopted by council.
I'm a little confused that, we obviously, at the last council meeting, we talked about the PRD, but did the planning commission talk about PRD?
I don't believe PRD was discussed. No, there was some RS10 was discussed, right, but PRD was not discussed at that time. Mm-mm.
So, Councilman Walker, you're on the planning commission, so y'all didn't talk about PRD then, but we're now. So, what did it leave the planning commission voted as what?
It was voted as RS5. It was a recommendation to rezone the whole tract. It was there were 8 members present. The vote was 6-2.
Okay, but there was no discussion of PRD or the importance of PRD then. I agree that PRD is something that we should, and that's why we paused this to look at it. So I was just curious why it wasn't discussed at the planning commission as well.
Well, I can probably speak to some of that. The Planning Commission takes things for study, and then we have a work session where we review them on Thursday. They've got the weekend to figure things out and decide it on a Monday. And they're it's a little bit different body, I think, than the city council, in that the council can decide to do whatever they want and what's best for the city, where the Planning Commission is looking at a particular zoning and trying to judge whether or not that fits within our zoning code and is proper. And so I think it's hard for them to kind of have this debate where, how do we want to treat, and this is the first one. I've learned a lot in the past month since the planning worked on this, and this is the first parcel that's this large being proposed like this. And so I think it's just something other cities are tackling this. This is happening in Lebanon, Mount Juliet, Gallatin, White House, all over Nashville. And they've come to try to figure out the best way to handle it. And I think that's the approach. I think that Cookeville's in a really great spot. We've got growth. We've got houses in our pipeline. And we've got we've got a great community, and we've got the benefit of trying to build it the right way. And I think that's really important. And I'm not discouraging this property to be developed. I'm encouraging it to set the framework in the correct direction. And I think that that's the best way to go.
Yeah, I fully understand how that planning commission works. I was just curious if there was ever, it was brought up, or if there was ever any mention or thought process during that on the PRD. So yes, they do definitely look at the zone in front of them of what was presented. But I was just curious if there was any debate or conversation or anything like that that would have spurred any further talk about this before that. The rest of what I'll say is this. I do think a person's home is their most valuable asset. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to try our best as we see growth and as we see things happening, land ready for development or to be developed, that we also are cognizant of the homes that are there and trying to protect those. And that's one of the reasons that I think if it was a PRD, similar things would happen in that you would transition zone. You would come down into the property away from the 20 and then step down to either a 20 or a 10 and then down to a more dense development. And so that can also be achieved with buffering on this property as presented. I know Mr. Ward had presented a couple of options that might work for buffering. In my opinion, I've seen a couple of design. I think there was a design that Mr. Cumby sent around that had the homes. I don't think it's in the best interest personally, if this was my family's house or someone that lived there, to see a smaller house right behind my house, but to have a transition. So a like size or similar size lot and house behind that would be more appropriate, which would be a step down, which you would also achieve ultimately in a PRD. The only bad thing about PRD, that can also be multifamily. So you can end up with many more housing units within this once it was decided. But that's not what's on the table right now. What's on the table is an RS5. There was a motion and second on. And so, is there a way, if we're going to consider this or not, is there a way to buffer this so it's more palatable to, I think at the end of this, everybody's going to, if this is rezoned, no one's going to be happy. And depending on the buffer, is people be less happy or more happy. I mean, that's pretty much, you have a development or not a development, and then what it looks like as far as the buffering. So I personally feel like there needs to be a buffer behind all of that, behind all the homes that are there now, and a buffer enough that it significantly, like there can't be a road where smaller houses are on one side of a road and there's an open spot seeing the back of bigger houses. I think there should be houses on both sides of a road. And I don't know what that takes to achieve that, but houses on both sides of a road behind the current houses that are there. That makes sense. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. What we're discussing there is that's transitions, right? I mean, that's being could be achieved with applying transitions in zoning and density between the existing residences and not. And that's, essentially some of the options we've tried to provide, right? This is rezoning the entire parcel. This would be a buffer, the transition, of zoning that would, this would exclude any of these areas adjacent to the existing residential as RS20, right? That was one of the options that we provided. Another option would provide a step down in density, which,
Right.
this would be an RS10, which would be an upsize in density, but it's a transition from RS20 to RS10 to RS5, which is, would be a logical transition to increase densities and provide those transitions to minimize impacts. And then, given the information we were provided, we had provided an option that would provide that transition from the existing residences along South Lovelady Road. And that's what you see on your screens before you now.
So we could essentially do RS10, I'm looking at this one as well, all along that eastern section right there, since the property up top is no longer, it's no longer part of the.
That's what's been indicated to us.
Okay.
I mean, we were just providing options based on what, the information we were provided.
And then doing the RS10 on both sides of the road would make it.
Yeah, how can, so I guess, how do we know where the road would be? I guess that's the question. I mean, obviously, there's a driveway coming in there, right between those two pieces of property.
Yeah, so we've tried to provide these exhibits based on the proposal that was provided. And, the one, in these options, it would be one side of the street, right? I mean, I've never made the development proposal part of the debate because it's, it isn't a PRD. This is a preliminary plat that's been submitted, right? So, but the exhibit that's before you guys now, that's on the western side of an entrance road off Lovelady. And then it would, that road continues west. And then this area has been revised some from some of the renditions we've seen that would provide lower densities on one side of a street, but higher densities on another side of the street. All right, that's what this exhibit would provide.
And that's what I was saying. It doesn't make sense to have a bigger house on one side, smaller on the other, 3 driveways back in it, on one side, 1 driveway on the other. That seems illogical from even a safety standpoint. I don't know.
Essentially, I mean, it's determined if the council wants to provide a transition and wants to move forward with some kind of action to approve this with a transition, and we just have to provide a transition, and the developer would have to provide a development compliant with the zoning, right? I mean, that would have to be something we would verify at the planning commission level if a development proposal came forward.
That's what I was going to ask. So you could say, I mean, you can't make it part of the rezoning, but it would then be dealt with at the planning commission, right?
Yes. So any next steps in this development will have to be approved by the planning commission.
Mr. Ward, I want to kind of clear up some terminology. We've used the term buffering and transitional zoning. And, when we worked on the PCD, this council worked on the PCD in the past. A buffer, we had a berm put in. We had some buffering requirements there, and there were very specific things like trees can be a buffer and specific to doing a PRD or a PCD. In a rezoning, you cannot make those requests. You can't enforce them. You can't make them happen. It's my understanding that this developer does want to do those things, and I think that's important, but there's no guarantee that will happen. It's my understanding they've already submitted a plat, and I haven't seen that plat, the latest one. But there's no guarantee that those buffering items will happen. But there is a guarantee that they have to meet the transition of zone. And so in the future, this will be RS5. And if it doesn't get developed and it gets developed later, it'll be a different plan that meets the code. And so the only way that you can look at it and say, we need a tree buffer here, we need to make sure there's not a road right behind someone's house here. And the only way that you can really guarantee that, and I'm really speaking about this for future development too, the only way that you can ensure that neighbors are protected like that when you do a development of this size is to do it in a PRD or a PCD to require buffering. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, so buffers are defined as an area where, where no
Right.
development activity can take place. I mean, part of buffering is also screening, so that's trees, things like that. So the city of Cookeville, we have buffer requirements and screening requirements that we apply from incompatible land uses, right? So commercial development versus residential, multifamily development versus single-family residential. But we don't apply those standards to single-family residential versus single-family residential. And that's what this request is it's an RS20, which is a single-family residential zone, to an RS5, which is a single-family residential zone. So it's there's single-family detached homes in either zone. The difference is the minimum lot size requirements and the setbacks and things like that, the yard requirements and such.
But the road or the plat would go back to the planning commission, and you could either approve or deny it based on where things are, features are within the plat, correct?
Well, we have specific standards for separations and things like that, right? I mean, and if a proposal is provided that meets our standards, it should be approved, right? And you need a basis for denying those things. So, you wouldn't want to be arbitrary with a denial. So, I mean, if something comes before planning and it meets the standards, it should be approved.
Hey, John, one other thing to note is that those transition proposals, those have specific distances. We have to have a description of an area, a legal description of the area that you're recalling. John, you might want to show what those are, explain how far back each of those are, which is busted with your width of your transition area through those, because that makes a big difference. But those have to be legally described in the ordinance. And if that's the route you go, that would have to be included in the ordinance secondly. But those do have specific distances on them, don't they, John?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so, I mean, in this option, right, I mean, you can see that the entire length of that, northern boundary with the side is 719 feet. That's reduced to 565 feet in this option. We don't have the description defined on this exhibit, but those distances would be defined, and those would be areas where the development would have to meet the requirements of the zone. So if it's in an RS10 area, the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet. If it's in an RS20, the minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. In the RS5 areas, lots can be 5,000 square feet minimum size.
So if there were a transitional zone put in this, and if it were approved on first reading, between first and second reading, could a proposal be presented if the developer so chose to do this, of what that would look like behind the houses as far as where it might be, and could it then become part of the second reading?
The answer to that would be no, right?
Okay.
I mean, you can't make a development
I
proposal.
didn't say, I said
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
chose to. I didn't say make it.
Yeah.
I just asked if they chose to do that. I understand you can't make them, and I
Yeah.
understand that.
Well, I mean, obviously we could, you guys could take that under consideration, but it still is not a requirement. So we wouldn't have any ability to require a design specific to the
If they
development.
chose to do that, and they presented that, you can't put it in the ordinance, though, correct? Okay, very good. Other comments? So the RS10 buffer, which was the one that was 19.83 acres,
That would be all around
correct?
since this property is under contract now and no longer, it's not part of the rezoning.
The corner property's RS29, it
Correct,
stays
yeah, Yeah, it
RS20.
stays RS20, so that doesn't get touched. So a new buffer would be along here.
I'm happy to bring any exhibit up the council would like for me to put on the screen.
That's the one that I was talking about, yeah. So I would like to make an amendment that we do a type of transition zoning. I think that we're trying to compromise here. We're trying to acknowledge that we understand that this is a different zoning that's going in behind there. So when you talk about RS10 being on both sides of this,
This would be this is an
The
option that
87
we
acres.
prepared, this is an exhibit we provided. You can see from the legend, we've determined the pink area would remain RS10 and the blue area would be rezoned to
I think it was-
RS5.
it was the one that was 93 acres, 90.
The 96 acre option would provide an RS20, would maintain the existing zoning along the existing residential area. And that would rezone 96 acres to
103
RS5.
acres.
Yes, this is the one
That's the
that
one
was
that-
prepared after we were told that there was a purchase contract.
Correct. So you no longer would need a transition buffer around that because that property's under contract now. And so anyone who would buy that in the future would
Yes.
understand.
Unless, I mean, at some point, obviously, this starts being developed, then if it didn't have that, then if it was RS5 there, then the front portion could be RS5, and then the houses there would be just surrounded by it. At least if you provided the buffer, then that probably stays a buffer off that corner, would be the only, that protects the other houses on the corner. I think if you,
But then those are already protected because that is RS20.
I know, but eventually, my point is, if that ever happens, if this is owned by the same folks, eventually that's going to be developed somehow, and so they might want to come back and make that denser zone too. So if you already had the transition there, then it becomes a natural transition. You could go to 10 because sewer would be there, and then that would be the same buffer.
Mr. Ward, if this was to come back, it's my understanding that, we received some information, that's what I think was being discussed, is that an additional property was purchased. And that's what, that would reduce some of this buffer requirement. And that's in the top corner there.
Yeah, this exhibit reflects that correspondence that staff and council received relative to this.
And so if this was, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
If this was a plan, if this was a PRD, could it not be included into that plan and decided on? And, once they've got, when these things are submitted, we're looking at one property. They come with a letter for that to be considered also, correct? I've kind of taken back from speculating on property that may have become under contract after the fact. And I think that's, though important, I think that is important, but it's hard to verify, hard to understand what the details on that are. And it's hard to bring that into the scope of the rezoning for me. And because, if it came back as a PRD, that could be included if they owned it. So you could also set buffering and transition zoning. You could do all of those things that way and have that discussion.
What was your motion?
I guess we can have discussion after that, but I was going to make a motion to do transitional buffering along that eastern portion there.
Transitional zoning.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, transitional zoning. Yeah, to RS10 along this eastern border here. I did have a question though. So this property that is under contract, how many acres is that? You know?
It's approximately 8. I'm not sure
8 acres,
exactly.
okay. So if that was to get developed and rezoned, that would have to come back separately to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
RS20.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not been reviewed by the planning commission. That would be required to be
Yeah,
reviewed.
that's a whole new,
Yeah.
that property has nothing to do with this development. It's
No.
just that property no longer is owned by or
Do you want to speak from a legal standpoint? We can't talk about
Well, if you want to propose an amendment, you can propose an amendment. You need to describe if you want this strip to be zoned, however you want it zoned, and then the remainder are zoned, however you want it zoned. And either describe as best you can the width, of course, it's going to have to be, like James says, written up in the formal legal description, but we can do that between first and second reading. If you're using these maps, you can identify the map and incorporate that into your motion, but you got to be a little bit specific about it. You can't require the things that Councilman Walker's talking about.
But the conversation about purchasing or potentially purchasing or something under contract really can't come into play here either, because can it?
Yeah, you're just talking about, we're rezoning these acres, and you can't really condition it upon purchasing or not doing this. We're just looking at the land as a whole. So
That's theoretical.
Correct. So, well, do you want to define your amendment to the motion? Which one you're amending, or what you're asking for here?
Sorry, so now I'm going back, because then there's two options, the option to rezone 96 acres and the option to rezone 87 acres. That first option, 96 acres was talked about, that was talking about RS20 just on one side of the road, correct?
I mean, I think all these are options for the council, right? Your options are 107 acres, your options are 96 acres, your options are 19.83 acres or 87 acres, or your options are 103 acres. I think the council has any of these options to take into consideration for the rezoning. It's all been reviewed by the planning commission and recommended as RS5. So it's up to the council to make any changes they would like to make. If they would like to modify what was recommended by the planning commission, that would be up to the council.
As long as it's less detrimental to the existing property owner, for people who are opposed.
Yes. And the planning commission reviewed.
Let's say
Yeah.
post it all as RS5, anything that is greater, that's lesser density,
Yes.
RS10 or higher should be fine.
Yes, I believe so. Thank you.
So, okay, so then, yeah, the 87 acre one, can we look at that one again? Yeah. So we would be.
That's where the
rezoning 87
RS
acres, yeah, with the RS10 buffer, transitional zoning, I'm so sorry, I keep saying buffer. RS10 transitional zoning along the dotted line area there as shown, and then rezone 87 acres to RS5.
Yes.
That is not an amendment.
So that's your motion to amend to do the 87 acres as 5 and the 19.83 acres as RS10. Is there a second?
I'm thinking of seconding this, but before I do, this is the 87 acre plot plan.
Yes, sir. It's the one that
Sorry for the
says
confusion on that.
site, and then underneath it's 87 acres. It has the largest amount of transitional area in pink.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second to do the transition, to amend this to RS10 in the 19.83 acre transition, and then the remaining 87 acres is RS5. Now we'll have discussion on the amended motion. On the proposed amendment, I apologize.
I just want to echo what you said. You know, we know people need housing. We know that we need affordable housing, but we also want to try to come to a compromise with the surrounding area. And that's what we're trying to do with this. And so that's why I would like to do this.
I do think with RS10, there's still quarter acre lots. So, I mean, I live in an RS10 neighborhood. I've got plenty of space between my neighbors. I do feel that this is a good transition here. I've got room to go out and kick soccer balls, and I've got a big backyard. So RS10 is, I wish we could go denser, but I'll be okay with RS10 here.
Yeah, that's under this proposal are the ones that you drew up, that has the most transitional area, that steps down from 20 to 10 to 5. That should allow, based on the sizes, and I guess you would have to, between second reading, then you would need to come out with the exact footprint of this as far as the dimensions.
So yeah, that is 19 acres of
Correct.
transition.
Other comments?
I appreciate the council's willingness to kind of accept the developer's trust on this, but at the end of the day, I mean, a transitional zone is not a buffer. You can build a road in it. You can put roads behind people's houses. There's a lot of options that will, not be considered. I believe the developer has the best intentions, but just at the end of the day, are we setting a precedent for how, are we going to draw lines in the map on the future and say that's going to be one zone, this is going to be another, or do we need to set a precedent for how large developing is done in Cookeville? And that's why I believe it's fundamental planning to me, and it's better planning for Cookeville.
I'm a little worried about setting a precedent that we're going against the recommendations of the planning commission because they take a lot of time to study these issues, but I do see where we do need some transition.
Okay. Got a motion and a second to amend this to the transition. Any other discussion on that? We'll vote on the amendment and then we'll come back to full discussion. So as amended would say rezoning 87 acres to 5, and then to the transitional zone of 19.83 acres would be RS10. That's what we're voting on, the amendment first. All right. All vote.
All votes correct. 4 yes, motion carries.
Now we'll finish discussion on as amended, the proposal being 87 acres of RS5, a 19.83 acre RS10. Further discussion on that. Any other comments or questions from the council?
I'd just like to reiterate that I think it's important for our city to go forward, looking at these as planned residential developments. And I think that if the planning commission and our city leaders will work with developers and work to grow our city, that can be a great tool for ensuring that the local communities can be also protected while developing. And I have some concern that if we move forward with an approach of just allowing RS5 developments at this scale, that we invite the idea of architectural standards, that we invite the idea of, anti-developmental growth. And, if you do it the right way, I think Cookeville will embrace growth.
Well, I would agree with that. And I would challenge Mr. Ward and the planning department and the planning commission to begin looking at that immediately, sooner than later.
Sure.
Absolutely.
We'll do that.
Any other comments or questions? All vote.
All votes correct. 4 yes, motion carries.
Under the consent agenda, 6A, consider awarding a bid for transformers for the electric department. 6B, set a date for a public hearing. 6/2/22 on ordinance 0220508, rezoning of 115 and 125 West First Street, tax map 53B, Group K, parcels 11 and 12 from CL Local Commercial to CBD Central Business District. And 6C, set a date for a public hearing, 6/2/22 on ordinance 0220509, rezoning of 14 and 18 Hunter Avenue and 684 West Broad Street, tax map 53A, Group G, parcels 5, 6, and 7 from RS10 Single Family Residential to CL Local Commercial. And that is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion second. Any discussion? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Under new business, 7A, hold a public hearing, consider on first reading ordinance 0220405, rezoning of properties located on West Spring Street, South Oak Avenue, Scott Avenue, Depot Street, tax map 53G, Group F, parcel 7 105, 11, 1101, 13, and 14, tax map 53G, Group G, parcel 16, and a portion of tax map 53G, Group G, parcel 7, and from CL Local Commercial to CBD Central Business District. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Here's the general location of the property under consideration. Here's the site map of the property. This is a portion of the builder supply site. It's located near our central business district. It's an aerial view of the property. The area contains approximately 4.31 total acres. The total area proposed for rezoning, including street right-of-ways, includes 5.24 acres. The properties are currently zoned CL, local commercial, as are adjacent properties to the north and west. The properties are bordered by the central business district to the east and CN neighborhood commercial to the south. The rezoning application was submitted to allow new residential development in this area. The CL district is intended for small and moderate-sized offices, personal business services, and general retail businesses serving the general population of the city. The maximum square footage of individual developments is restricted within the district and is determined by street classification. The CBD district with complementary office and related uses forms the center for commercial, financial, professional, governmental, and cultural activities. The future land use concept element of the Cookeville 2030 plan depicts this area as best suited for mixed use, commercial, industrial development. CBD zoning is compliant with the future land use designation. An important distinction between the CL and CBD zoning districts is the minimum building setback requirements. The CL district requires a minimum setback along all street frontages of 30 feet. The CBD district generally does not require minimum setback, provided visibility to intersections is not obstructed. The allowed maximum lot coverages requirements are also different between the two districts. The CL district allows a maximum of 60% coverage, while the CBD district does not have a maximum lot coverage requirement. The permitted uses between both districts are similar, but the CL district allowing several automobile-related uses that are not permitted within the central business district. Upon review by the Planning Commission, the CBD district does allow for multifamily and townhouse residential developments at double the density of the CL zone, 1,500 square feet per dwelling unit in the CBD versus 3,000 square foot per dwelling unit in the CL zone. The properties are the current location of Builder Supply Company. Garrett Brothers Concrete has also been operating from this location. Garrett Brothers now has their new location in operation on Tennessee Avenue. A portion of the property off West Spring Street and South Cedar Avenue is currently zoned CBD, Central Business District. This area includes various storage structures utilized by Builder Supply Company that would also be redeveloped. The area also includes the El Milagro Restaurant and Market. The existing development in the subject area is non-conforming to many aspects of the zoning code. The application has been submitted to redevelop this area for residential development. Upon further discussion with the petitioner, residential development of the area would include single-family and multifamily components such as townhomes, apartments. The planning department recognizes that redevelopment of this area conforming with the zoning code is desirable. The proposal would bring a residential component to our downtown area. The Water Quality Control Department has provided a sewer service capacity request for this proposed rezoning. The western section was approved for 91 residential units. An application for the eastern section for 84 residential units was not approved. The Water Quality Control Department indicates that approximately 325 feet of 8-inch sewer line would need to be replaced with 10-inch sewer line to accommodate the number of proposed units in this eastern section. The Water Quality Control Department has indicated they have no objections to moving forward with the rezoning as the developer works through the necessary improvements. No building permits could be issued for this eastern section until the sewer improvements were approved by the Water Quality Control Department. Well, here we have a couple aerial views. You'll see this is looking to the north. A portion of this eastern section is already zoned CBD. The remainder was zoned CL. This proposal to rezone is, an effort for redevelopment of this property. And this is looking from north back to the south. So the request for rezoning was approved by the Planning Commission as recommended by the Planning Department. I recommend approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll open the public hearing portion of the meeting. Do we have anyone that wants to speak about this matter? No? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion is second. Comments or questions from the council? Councilman Waller.
How big is this?
The total acreage is it's the total rezoning area is about 5.25 acres. Just the actual fee simple property that's being rezoned is 4.31 acres. That 5.25 includes the street right of way. There's a fraction of acreage that's also already zoned CBD, where some of those storage structures that have frontage on Spring Street around Ralph's Donuts are currently located. That would also be included in a redevelopment project for the property.
Councilman.
I've had a lot of positive comments about this. A lot of people want to move downtown and live in an urban style setting in our downtown district. And I'm really excited about this development. So thanks for taking it on for us.
Thanks.
Comments? I think this is exciting. This will be a cool vibe downtown, and it'll be a great addition. All right, I'll vote.
All votes correct. Yes, motion carries.
Thank you. 7B, hold a public hearing, consider on first reading ordinance O-220406, rezoning of 1100 South Willow Avenue, tax map 65, parcel 98, from CG General Commercial to CR Regional Commercial. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Here's a general location of this. This is the Norwalk. This is what people know as the Norwalk property on the corner of South Willow and I-40. Here is a site map of this property. And there's an aerial view. This rezoning area, the rezoning area of the parcel consists of approximately 3.44 acres. This is a portion of tax map 65, parcel 98. The total rezoning area, including the Green Gate Lane, South Willow Avenue, and I-40 right-of-ways, consists of approximately 48.08 acres. The property is currently zoned CG, General Commercial. The property is bordered to the south by RM14, multifamily residential, to the east by an area of the current parcel to remain as CG General Commercial, and to the east and west by CG General Commercial. The rezoning application was submitted to allow for commercial development compliant with the CR Regional Commercial Zone. So to note the developers have asked to maintain this section along the eastern boundary. It's dissected by a water feature. There's a creek that runs there, and they wanted to maintain that as CG on that section. The CG district is intended for moderate and larger size offices, personal and business services, and general retail business. The maximum square footage of individual developments is restricted to 120,000 square feet within the CG district. The CR district is intended for medium to large scale commercial operations of a predominantly regional nature. CR districts must be located on major collector streets or higher classifications. The future land use concept element of the Cookeville 2030 plan depicts this area as best suited for mixed use, commercial, industrial, and regional commercial development. The future land use designation is compliant with the CR zoning district. The property is located on South Willow Avenue, which is classified as a major arterial street. The application was submitted to allow development to exceed 120,000 square feet as limited by the current CG general commercial designation. Everybody's familiar with this. It's a couple of recent aerials from this. You see the old pad for the Norwalk building still on the site. That's looking back to the northeast, and this is a part of the area. You can see the drain that dissects that they want to maintain on the other side. So this request was approved by the Planning Commission as recommended by the Planning Department. I recommend approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll open the public hearing portion. Is there anyone that'd like to speak about this matter? We'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Any comments or questions from the council?
I think we hit the bullseye on this one, John.
Any other comments or questions? I'll vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
7C, hold a public hearing, consider on first reading ordinance O-220507, amending the budgets of the general fund, State Street Aid Fund, Solid Waste Fund, Tree Board Fund, Animal Control Fund, General Obligation Debt Service Fund, General Improvement Bond Fund, Transportation Fund, and Health Insurance of the city of Cookeville, Tennessee for the fiscal year ended June 30. Ms. Emmel.
Mayor and council, the end of the fiscal year is next month, and we are proposing budget amendments for numerous funds before we close out the fiscal year. Most are normal year-end amendments that we address every year, workers' comp claims we didn't expect, grants that we received during the year, retirements, things that occurred that we didn't plan on. We also have some departments that expect to exceed their budget in some lines because of higher costs such as fuel. And some are just housekeeping actions, or housekeeping for actions that the council had taken earlier this year. But the amendments do have a few things that are not in that kind of category, and I wanted to call your attention to. This ordinance will increase the appropriation for expenditures in the general fund by $1,674,000. This includes $114,000 to appropriate funds for the replacement of the Leslie Town Center roof, which we'll be addressing later this evening. It also appropriates $600,000 in a transfer to state street aid for paving that we're doing. We're trying to pave additional streets around town as much as we can under the current contract that we have. And it also includes a $500,000 transfer to our employee insurance fund for health insurance claims. And then on the revenue side, the good news is that we expect to have additional revenues to cover these additional expenditures this year. So this ordinance increases the appropriation for revenues by $1,688,000. And we are recognizing $114,000 in AR American Rescue Plan money, and that will offset the cost of the Leslie Town Center roof. FEMA also has completed and obligated our claim for the 2021 ice storm, and we're expecting to receive about $88,000 there. And then sales tax is expected to exceed budget, and it's hitting record levels, and this amendment appropriates an additional $1.2 million there. On the state street aid side, we're appropriating a transfer in from the general fund for paving and increasing the expenditures there. And then there's an increase in expenditures for vehicles. That was a patch track that was actually approved last January of 2021. It was not delivered until this March. It took over a year to get here. Solid waste is kind of normal stuff. Tree board. The only thing I'd point out on this one is the animal control board. We did receive an additional distribution from the heirs bequest, and so we're increasing the appropriation for revenues by $119,000 there. General obligation debt service. This is a lot of housekeeping here. We had two large bond transactions that we had all approved this year. One was to refund the 2015 issue into the 2021 issue, and then you voted to approve us paying off the 2017, which we will do on June 1st. So it's kind of housekeeping amendments there for all those transactions. And then in the general improvement bond fund, additional appropriation there as the final payments are coming through for the Cedar Avenue project. And then the transportation fund, increasing the appropriation there for construction on phase 1 of 10th Street. We had originally budgeted, assuming our folks in-house would do that, and we ended up bidding it out and going outside, so the cost is a lot more than what we had planned. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, but I recommend your approval of the ordinance.
Thank you. We'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak about this matter? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion second. Any comments or questions from the council? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
7D, consider resolution R220512, amending the personnel policies and procedures manual. Carl Sells.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We have a very simple and straightforward request to you tonight, and that is to add some verbiage to Chapter 8 of the city's Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual. If you authorize that change, the new language will read as follows. The applicable rules of the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System pertaining to sworn police officers and certified firefighters differ from those pertaining to other city employees. The former are required to retire no later than the first day of the first month following their 60th birthday. Therefore, any police officer or firefighter who is required to retire prior to the date of their employment anniversary within the same calendar year is eligible to receive longevity as if they had worked until their anniversary date, as long as the other requirements of the longevity program are met. We are recommending that you authorize this change, and I'll be willing to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions?
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
7E, consider awarding bid for Leslie Town Center roof replacement. Mr. Mills.
Charles, would you click that a couple? One more, please. Mayor, council members, we advertised and received bids for the replacement of the roof at the Leslie Town Center. If you remember, we did this once before, several weeks ago, and didn't have a bid that met spec, so we rebid it. On this new bid, two bids were received, which were open on April 22nd, 22. And the low bid meeting specification was Allen's Roofing at $112,700. I'd recommend for your approval of the bid.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
7F, consider authorizing the city manager enter into a contract with the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, OCJP, review the Victim of Crimes Act, VOCA grant for the police department. Chief Evans.
Mayor and council, this essentially extends the vocal grant that we currently hold with the OCJP. It does fund our victim services coordinator, and we've had this grant. This will be our 6th year if you vote to accept this. This grant pays us $54,773 toward that salary and benefits for that employee. And then we're responsible for the remainder of that salary and benefits and any training expenses that we might incur. And I'd recommend your approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
7G, consider awarding bid for 2022 CCTV and manhole rehab project, water quality control. Barry Turner.
Mayor and members of the council, this is a sewer rehab project consisting of CCTV work, rehabilitating manholes and some laterals. We received 2 bids, and the low bid being from Bobby Luttrell and Sons in the amount of $206,168, and I recommend approval of their bid.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comments or questions? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. 7H, consider awarding bid for 2022 pipe bursting project. Barry Turner.
Okay, this is also a sewer rehab project consisting of pipe bursting approximately 1,100 feet of sewer line and replacing the laterals that connect to it. We received 3 bids on this project. The low bid was $275,934.59, submitted by Portland Utilities Construction, and I recommend we award the contract to them.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Motion second. Any discussion? All vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
7I, declare surplus 545 Woodmont Drive and authorize city manager to sell the property by public auction or sealed bid. Ronnie Kelly.
Mayor and council requesting the city council declare 545 Woodmont Drive as surplus city property. This is general location. It's off of Mitchell Avenue off 10th Street. This property was obtained in a settlement with the owner and approved by council on August 6th of 2020. This is a picture of the house. Looks a little better. It's older pictures. Looks a little better than it currently is. We've connected the house to a grinder pump sewer system. And so we'd like to request the city council authorize the city manager to engage an auctioneer and a real estate agent to sell the property. After we determine the best method to do that, city manager approval, we would then put the property up for sale. And I'd recommend approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion?
So, I do have a comment. Are we gonna set a minimum price?
I had some discussions with Danny beforehand, so.
No, I suggest as long as the city manager negotiate the sale, if he can set a minimum price if he wants to, rather than discussing that in the public meeting.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, I got you.
Yes. It's all in your hands, Mr. Mills. All the pressure is on you, sir. Okay, we've got a motion second. Any other discussion? I'll vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
7J, direct city manager to evaluate on-street parking alignment on East Broad Street in front of the post office and to authorize any changes determined necessary. Mr. Mills.
Mayor and council members, after our work session on Monday, and we had some discussion about the parking in front of the post office, I asked Blake Mayo, who's our new public works director, replacing Greg, I guess, effective Monday, I asked him to look at the alignment in front of the post office, which all our parking designs are based on the manual and uniform traffic control devices. And currently in front of the post office, there are 9 angled parking spaces. And Blake has reviewed it, and this is an analysis of it. And those 9 angled spaces could be converted to 5 parallel spaces. So we've moved 4 spots. Here's an aerial photograph with the proposed spaces overlaid there in front of the post office. We believe that the parallel alignment would improve visibility at the intersection. I would ask or request your authorization to make the change in the parking alignment. If you have any specific questions, any engineering questions, I'm going to refer those to Blake.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion is second. Any questions from the council?
So I was actually here when the girl was struck by the truck. We were right across the street at CPAC, and it was a complete freak accident. It was not anybody's fault. In a very unfortunate situation, from what I've heard, the girl's doing okay, not out of the woods yet. But you know, the way it happened, it could have been any one of our kids that just jump out right there. So I appreciate the city taking a look at this and trying to make that area safer, because it is a very walk area. We walk to CPAC and we don't use a crosswalk. Hope Randy Evans, I use a crosswalk. I'm just kidding. But I'm really glad that we're taking a look at this to make this a safer area for pedestrians.
No comments? All right, I'll vote.
All votes correct. 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda portion of the meeting. We have time at the end if someone that'd like to address the council on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone? Oh, yes, please identify yourself.
Mika Burgess, 725 Whitson Avenue. And I was at a performance on Saturday as well. So I just want to thank you for speaking up and recognizing that happened on Saturday. You know, it was a packed CPAC on Saturday. A lot of concerned kids, a lot of families concerned. And so what is the plan for better crosswalks? We have one, and yes, people don't use it properly. And so thank you for making the recommendation that maybe we address parking. So I would like the council and those that help plan our city to consider crosswalks in the future as well, or even on these big events like that, having officers helping, because there's so many little ones. And like I said, I mean, there were people very upset on Saturday. And so it's a great fixture in our community. And so we don't want it to be tainted. So I would really like you guys to consider that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Council, anybody have anything? Councilman?
I want to thank Mr. Ward. I don't know if you've went through the entire agenda, but we probably voted on about $300 to $400 million worth of development tonight in the city. If you really think about the 3 major developments that we voted on, that'll be transformative for our city in the future. So I want to thank the council for all the work and the city staff as well for that.
Yep. Any other comments? We're adjourned.